Hi folks, had some new toys delivered since my last video. First of all, this absolutely beautiful Psy-Taff, a taff being top airflow, so it's kind of like a vaporizer which screws onto the mod box. And how good is it? Well, I don't know because I haven't tried it yet, but I'll probably be trying it this week sometime, just get some early impressions of it. But my goodness, what a lovely piece of kit that looks. Something else as well is this full spectrum freebase harmless extract. So yeah, I'm going to give that a try as well, I think. Not at the same time as that, I don't think, but sometime very soon. I thought I'd give these a try again. I don't know if you've seen these before. These are Hawaiian baby woodrose seeds, and I had a horrendous experience with these a couple of years ago, and just to actually be in the same room as these is a miracle for me because it really was bad. But we'll see what they're like. Today's video is not all about that, it's about something else. So I'll be chatting about one reason why I'll be continuing to trip with DMT for as long as I possibly can. And it's an experience that appears to bring me really close to a powerful loving presence. Now, I know that sounds a bit cheesy, but I'm afraid this is going to be a rather cheesy video. But I've been privileged to have several of these type of trips, and here I'll be describing the first one as best I can and how it changed my attitude and demeanour towards, well, just about everything in my whole life, to be honest with you. Now, after I first discovered DMT, my first 10 to 15 trips were really kind of like pleasant joyrides on almost like a wild interdimensional roller coaster. And like most of us, I made the most of them, and I was tripping as often as I dared at the time, and they were absolutely incredibly good fun and seemingly nothing too serious about them. But after a while, I started noticing a very brief sense of deep peace and love, especially off-peak and during the come-downs. But it only lasted a few seconds, so it just served to be like a perfect ending to a really great trip. But a bit later, when I began to augment the DMT with an MAOI, as we were talking about in the previous video, this part of the trip often became greatly intensified, and after a while, I've got to be honest with you, I was really struggling to cope with the enormity of it all. The first experience like this was on the come down from one particularly intensive trip, which had been augmented by Syrian Rue, and the visuals had been really overwhelming, and I was actually quite relieved when they started to ease off a bit. And as I started to relax, a thought ran through my mind which roughly translates to, how would you like to see the realm of love? Now again, if you're a DMTer, maybe you're familiar with the way these thoughts sometimes pop into your head, and I'd love to know where they come from. I mean, to me these seem exactly like some sort of non-verbal communication with something or someone unknown. Or is it just all our imagination? I mean, who knows? But some folks call them intrusive thoughts, which kind of seems an apt description. But whatever else, the realm of love sounded pretty good to me. And the next thing I know is the visuals instantly vanished to like a really dark blackness. And then slowly, the most absolutely incredible patterns, like they just like gyrating into view. They were just mind-blowingly beautiful. I mean, I'd never, ever experienced visuals like these before. They were really on a totally different level. And all the more surprising because, as I mentioned before, by then it felt like I was on a slow come down from the peak intensity. Best way I can describe it, it's almost like when you're used to watching videos on your phone and then all of a sudden it switched to a huge super 5D cinema right across the whole universe. And the beauty and the grace was just breathtakingly beautiful. And I say, I was totally blown away like never before. On some previous trips I felt like I wasn't alone, but never anything remotely like this presence that was now spreading right through all parts of this vista. It was just so colossally, unimaginably powerful, just radiating this excruciatingly intense love and kindness. It was just so amazing. And the love was so pure. It was non-judgmental, it was forgiving, 100% unconditional. It was absolutely phenomenally beautiful beyond anybody's wildest imagination. I was absolutely, completely awestruck. And I could actually sense it was well aware of my presence too. Somehow, it just knew that every single thing about me, far better than even myself, it knew. All the good, the bad, every last hair on my head, and every single one of me darkest secrets. But it actually seemed to love me because of these things rather than despite them. Oh, but the sheer intensity of love was just unbelievable. And to be honest with you, until this point, although I hate to admit it, I'm not sure I actually realised what love really was. I mean, I've been married for many years, but I just kind of thought love was just a soppy word, or maybe something they just put in films to spin them out a bit, or maybe something that pop groups sing about when they can't think of anything else. Okay, I'm sure I was being naive, but I have no idea at all it could be just so absolutely... it was just unbelievable, honestly. Now, I wouldn't describe these visuals as intense or dazzling. They were just really gentle, but becoming ever more gorgeous, just like an intricately timed orchestra right across the whole of existence. It was just so graceful. I guess for anybody religiously inclined, it'd be easy to see how the visuals could be interpreted as angels, or maybe take on some other religious significance. Possibly even anybody in this realm could kind of have their own expectations fulfilled to a large extent. But that's not taking anything away from it. Oh my goodness, it was just incredible. And being in this realm, it seemed like I'd become a lot more perceptive or wiser in that the many things I was wondering about, a really simple answer just popped straight into my mind. And in case you're interested, at this time there was absolutely no doubt in my mind that the presence didn't just love me alone. And I know it's a moth-eaten old cliche, but to me, it's still obvious now that it just doesn't matter one single jot whether you're young or old or black or white or gay or straight or bi or trans or rich or poor or a saint or a murderer or any combination of those. Every single last person has a divine right to enter this realm of intense love, and it's just beautiful. I mean, to me, it just seems as much a part of us as having ears or a nose. And if there was such a thing, I mean, maybe that's the scientific definition of divine. And I've since thought an awful lot about this realm. I mean an awful lot. And I really wonder is this the place that Jesus, Muhammad and the other spiritual leaders have been great pains to tell us about? And was the presence the God figure that's mentioned in the Bible? I mean, it certainly seemed to fit. But if so, then the mainstream religions have really been quite bad at conveying the true enormity and just the sheer beauty of it. And then it's almost like the presence guided my thoughts to, like insights about my life back on Earth and, how my life had passed and where I might be going. And in the sheer brilliance of this love, I actually began to feel as if I'd been making some really serious mistakes in my life priorities. And immediately, straight away, there and then, I became utterly determined that in the time I've got left, I've just got to try and take as much of this amazing love back as I can, however small amount that is, and just spread it to as many folks as I can in my life. And I just wanted to get started straight away. So I actually started racking my brains how best to do it. And I was having all these grandiose ideas, and maybe thinking about trying to raise funds to build a children's hospital, or maybe starting up a doggies home, or maybe even travel the world and telling people about this wonderful presence. But I had an instant thought reply. A rough translation would be something like, oh, you don't need to do anything like that. Just do your best to love every single person in your life as I'm loving you right now. That's all you need to do. And it was a really simple message, and it made just perfect sense. And also, to my amazement, it was exactly like this presence added to that. Look, mate, I've never got my hands dirty building hospitals and things. I just stick to what I'm best at, which is loving folks. Which seemed utterly hilarious in this majestic setting. It was the very last thing I expected for it to have a sense of humour. I mean, maybe most of us think of the classic God figure as like an angry bearded old man who sneakily follows us around, writing down our dirty little deeds in his black book, just as an excuse to take a great delight in sending us off to hell when we die. But that image is totally unlike the presence I just seem to be having a good laugh with now. I mean, totally different. Oh, and another thing you might be wondering is this convince me about life after death? And the short answer to that would be that in this realm, the continuation of consciousness is an absolute given. In fact, the question would have seemed so trivial and daft in the vast realm of this possibilities. It would have been a bit like a toddler asking his dad, Dad, when I grow up, will I still have ears? That kind of thing. I know it sounds daft, but that's the way it was. And I began to ponder how I could start to show a bit more love to the people in my day-to-day life, So firstly, I started thinking about my little lady. We've been married quite a few years, and like most couples, we've had our ups and downs. But we've now found a quiet path that suits us both. But oh my God, I was being shown a totally different and incredible vision of her, almost in the form of like a a really beautiful energy pattern, which I now realise was actually an integral part of the vast gyrating visuals that I could see. And I could see so clearly what a gentle, caring soul she is. It just stuck out a mile. And also the vast sacrifices she's made to embrace me as a lifelong partner, constantly trying to nurture every single need and rescuing me from my early destructive habits, tolerating all sorts of faults that I've got. It was so moving. I was just completely stunned. And I could see every single aspect of her amazing personality and, just what exactly made her tick to the very last brain cell. Now, over the years, I'd never ever realised the extent of her love for me. She'd literally given me a whole life, and all she ever wanted in return was just to see me happy and just to give a little love back. I was absolutely dumbfounded. And yeah, I really felt quite bad at the end for not stepping up always. But that's another remarkable thing about this presence. It's so powerful, but it really, really doesn't want you to feel terrible about anything bad you've done. And it really knows how to make you feel better straight away. I mean, again, who knows? But maybe this is what's meant by God being forgiving or whatever. Instead of feeling really guilty, I was just shown some ridiculously easy things I could do to transform things, like instantly. And I won't go into too much detail, but it was only really little things like telling her I love her occasionally and, like leaving little funny notes around the house, listening with interest to her little stories, even though I've heard them all hundreds of times before, complimenting on her hair and her clothes and things like that. It was all really trivial stuff, but I was now watching in real time a vision of her life happiness grow exponentially, as if I was already doing this stuff. It was just incredible. And believe me, I just couldn't wait to get started. But even then, far more mind-blowing stuff was to follow. Now it was as if I was being shown, well, almost like a map of our local neighbourhood. The street and a few surrounding roads. And the maps showed kind of like places where people lived who were really suffering due to loneliness or just simply lack of friendly interaction. Some of these people I barely knew, but even so I could feel what it was like to be in their circumstances. And I got this for 5 or 6 different folks simultaneously, like all together at once. And to name one example, Elsie lives 4 doors down from us. She's in her 80s and widowed, having lost her husband to cancer in about 1997, and she seldom seems to get any visitors. She's well known around because once you get talking to her, there's just no getting away, like literally for hours and hours, and she never listens to anything you say. It's all just her non-stop. And she's out front almost every single day in a huge flowery dresses mowing her arid lawn, totally bald, and ready to pounce on any passers-by. A lot of folks avoid her really because they just find her hard work. Plus, they don't really want to be hanging around the street for hours chatting to her, and I totally get that. In fact, until then, I kind of thought the same, really, which I just thought she was a very dear lady, but slightly possy. But what I was being shown now really was a completely different version of her. In startling clarity, I could just see Elsie as an unbelievably beautiful soul with an almost sacred dignity, which had just been really badly worn down by enduring a really tough set of life challenges. And I could feel her heartbreaking agony in missing her late husband, just like I was actually her. And it was totally obvious, too, that she was well aware that her non-stop talking was driving people away. But it was the only safety valve she had to try and relieve like the worst of her pain. And this presence showed me all sorts of other details about her worries and difficulties, and how the loneliness was really amplifying each problem. And at that moment, it just felt like I was exactly like Elsie herself, and I just couldn't believe the torture of how she could possibly survive in just her horrific state. It was really, really unbelievable. And that was just for one person. I had this similar thing for 4 or 5. I mean, some more detailed than others, but it was really devastating. I just couldn't wait to rush out and try and put things right. But again, this presence sort of calmed me down, and it seemingly communicated, look, just small steps, a little at a time is better. And there were loads of other insights flowing all about love and how the lack of it affects everybody, and all sorts of things about when we come into contact with people in our daily lives, and driving to work to supermarket shopping. It really was extremely interesting, not to mention ludicrously beautiful. And it seemingly all went on for a lot longer than the 15 minutes or so that had actually passed in the real world. Well, I've got to say, the whole thing was just totally unbelievable. And eventually I noticed the remaining visuals were fading quite fast, and with them, sadly, so were the insights. But I could still feel this beautiful presence for quite a while until the trip was just pretty much over. And so ended the most life-changing half hour of my entire life, with a simple but really powerful message, which is just love everybody in your immediate life as best you can. And I stood up. I had an almost uncontrollable urge to rush into my wife and tell her how much I really loved her. But I remembered the presence almost advising, a little at a time, and also it was 3:40 in the morning and she was fast asleep. But oh my goodness, it was just absolutely beautiful. And it actually took 2 full weeks to adjust back to normal life after this. I had great trouble in eating and sleeping, and I just couldn't think of anything else, and at times I just lost control of my emotions completely. And I spent a lot of time trying to think up excuses why I just had to trip again and hopefully get back into that same realm. But I thought after a while, I've just really got to get things going and stop being such a wet blanket. Well, it's been 2 years since that first trip of its type, and you might be wondering how things have changed. Well, I really did start doing little romantic things for my wife, like just little things like I mentioned earlier. And it's been really a delight to see how these little things can lead to much, much bigger things. And it's been amazing, as I would have shown it would be. She now seems like a totally different lady, and it's so nice to see the effect it's had on her. Without much exaggeration, honestly, she's just like a silly teenager who was always happy and laughing and just so much more confidence. And for me, it's been just zero effort. The rewards have been utterly staggering, and I mean staggering. If there has been a downside, it's the fact that I just never get a single minute's peace these days. She always wants to tell me absolutely every little thing that pops into her head and constantly wants a cuddle and a kiss. But I just think how much nicer it is to be married to a lady like this, and I assure you there's really no going back now. And Elsie, who I mentioned, well, I started to go out and chat with her whenever I heard a mower going, and I didn't care how long I was out there, be it rain or shine or anything else. I just let her chat and chat and chat. And I even asked her questions, if I could get a word in edgeways. And as the weeks passed, she started inviting me around her back garden, showing me her plants and her bushes and all that kind of thing. And I must have spent literally hundreds upon hundreds of hours listening to her till she talked herself absolutely dry. And I even got some of the other neighbours on board, and would often find one or more already round there when I went. And one of these chaps started to do bits of shopping for her. Another bloke put an outside light in her back garden. Another started helping out in all sorts of other ways. And to see her beaming happiness as the month went by was, to me, honestly, it was just beautiful. It was far better than winning $1 million on the lottery. It was so nice. And also, it's almost like my perceptions of other folks have changed. I used to regard other folks I didn't know as potentially dangerous robots which were best to avoid. But now I just can't help but think of everybody I meet as just all existing as part of this same presence, and one day they probably also find themselves being blown away with it just as much as I was. I'm also finding that, except for 2 former close friends, most people are actually just so much easier to get on with. I mean, my relationship with other folks in everyday life, such as neighbours, the guy in the car behind, folks in the supermarket, even your folks that I speak to over the web, it's just so much easier and more harmonious. It doesn't work for everybody, that's fine. But just check back with me in 5, 10 or 20 years, because I'm absolutely sure this is just going to be the very start. I've had similar trips since this one. Sometimes I get different personal insights, but they're always as simple and as powerful. For example, I also had one that was focused on forgiveness and another on some unresolved family issues. But I've never had any revelations about existential mysteries like living in a simulation or whether aliens exist or spiral dynamics or anything like that. They're always very simple and powerful and directly relevant. In fact, I went through a really sweet spot last year when I had 5 or more God trips in as many months, and I really thought they were going to go on forever. Oh, and just to try and anticipate a question that might come up, do I think I've been enlightened? Well, that term doesn't really compute with me. My only motivation is always just to witness the differences I can help make, and I'd love to get closer to this God presence, and it's made it very clear how I can best do that. Now, I realise that this is pretty far out stuff, and I'll respect your opinions irrespective of what they are on this. But for me alone, in my mind, the loving creative source has just become an unavoidable reality, which I doubt I'll ever shake. And whilst neither I nor science can prove it, I'm certain that every single last person, and I mean you too, is more intensely loved than we can ever imagine in our wildest dreams, and it's truly, truly beautiful. Hope you found the video of interest. Best wishes, max respect, and I'll catch you very soon. Bye bye.